This journey is about feeling. One truth that I've arrived at in the last couple of months after going through 2 years of my awakening and spiritual initiation. I've arrived at a point where I realize that this journey is more about feeling. It's something that we are not used to, something we haven't done our whole lives. For an example, with me, for the last, I'd say, 20 years, I have not been feeling. Before my spiritual awakening, I had not been feeling. I was just living life. I was not in touch with my feelings so much. Why? Because after losing my mom, I learned to be strong. Immediately after losing my mom, I learned to be strong because I don't even remember crying that much when she passed on. I was still stuck between denial and grief and a whole lot of emotions that I just learned to be strong and to be contained. I think that's the correct word. So after my mom died, I lived with my uncle for about 3 months. I was not used to living with my uncle, so their way of doing things wasn't the same as what I was used to. So I moved to my paternal side, because I was used to living with my paternal side, and they raised me until I was like 9ish. That's when I moved and lived with my mom. I lived with my mom for like 4 or 5 years, and then she passed on. So I was very close to them. So I moved back there. But the biggest challenge is that I was already a teenager at the time, and they owned a tavern, and my maternal side was not comfortable with that because they're very conservative, and they understood the challenges and some a part of inherited trauma. So they were afraid of a lot of things happening to me, and they felt very responsible now that my mom wasn't there. So my oldest aunt, decided to take me. So I used to travel about 100 k's, 200 k's a day. So 100 going to school and 100 coming back home. That's like 200 k's for about 6 months. I finished my grade 10, and I then moved in with her and lived in that area, and then they found me a school that side. So there was no time to feel. There was no time to actually go through emotions at all. Um, it wasn't stable. It wasn't like life was just happening. There was just movement and decisions and this and that. So I learned to be contained very early in life. I learned to be self-reliant very early on in life. I learned to be strong by be independent very early on in life because my dad wasn't the most reliable person, and I didn't expect any kind of support from him either. My mom, maybe because I always thought my mom could be a more of a supportive parent because I didn't live with her, so it was just that feeling of my mother is a better option. I always longed to be with my mom, but she was at school at the time, still struggling and going through life as well. And so there was no time for feeling. So this has always been an advantage and a disadvantage, I would say, in friendships and romantic relationships, because it was a strength and also a weakness at the same time. Being contained has always been a strength and a weakness at the same time, because most people saw me as the strongest one. Most people saw me as the most reliable one. Most people saw me as someone who's got her head together. And with that, excuse me, with that came a lot of responsibility, a lot of emotional labor, a lot of being a peacemaker. You kind of had to figure yourself out, raise yourself. In a way, I do feel like I did raise myself. And with raising yourself, you become independent very fairly quickly. And you learn to understand emotion, you learn to understand people's struggles, you learn to be a peacemaker. You learn to solve problems. You learn to be self-sufficient. And sometimes that becomes a burden because you have to necessarily help other people figure themselves out, regulate other people's emotions. Emotional labor becomes a thing. You don't have time for yourself. You don't have time for your emotions. You don't have time to take care of yourself because you're constantly taking care of other people. You are constantly protecting yourself from harm. You're always looking out for yourself. If you win, if you figure it out, that's a win. If you get in and come out without being scratched, that is a win. That is basically what I did my whole life, which is always protecting myself, which made me somehow avoidant and also somehow secure in terms of attachment style. But again, it came with so much emotional weight and labor. And relationships, you'll be the one that fixes things, the communicator, the one that knows the answers, what to do next. In friendships, same thing. When people are going through things, you are the one that sorts the things. You are the one who comes up with solutions. You are the one that is, I'd say, more grounded than anyone else. And one thing I learned while going through my journey is that immediately I started my awakening process. That toughness in me, that strongness in me, that personality of being grounded, the strongest, the most amazing, the most knowing answer, the one with the wisdom, fell apart immediately. It felt like there was something, a big rock on top of me, or something on top of me that was so heavy. For the first part of my journey, I was emotional. And the emotions came from the heaviness that I felt. I felt tired. I felt like I've been carrying the whole world on my shoulders my whole life. I was so tired. The one thing that I cried for or cried about was how tired I was. I felt tired. Sorry. I felt tired. I felt exhausted. I cried to God, to my ancestors, to my spirit guides. I told them how tired I was. And at the same time, while you're tired, you're crying for the tiredness, you are starting to feel things you have not felt in many, many, many years, because now you are offloading what's not yours. You are removing what doesn't belong to you. And then the emotions start flooding in, which are some of the things you have not felt in many, many, many years. My childhood, my relationship with my mom, my relationship with my dad, the things that happened when I was a little girl, at some point I stopped thinking about them. I stopped remembering them. I stopped feeling them because I was the strong one. I remember one time a friend of mine once said, while I said I was going through a spiritual journey, she said to me, I know you're going to make it because you're the strongest one out of the group. There was 4 of us. And she said to me, I know you're going to make it because you're the strongest one in the group. I got triggered. I don't know why I got triggered. Like I cried just because she said that. She sent me a text message, so she doesn't really know I cried. I cried so much. I'm like, no, I'm not strong. Just for the fact that she said. And you know, most of the time when somebody says you're the strong one, it's like a compliment. It's like, you know, I trust you. You should keep going. This is amazing. But for her saying that to me, that really triggered me. It made me question myself. It made me question, why am I the strong one? Why must I be strong? Because I could be like everyone else, ignore things, avoid things, and just, live a simple and comfortable life. But unfortunately or fortunately, I am that person even in reality in my spiritual journey. I carry other people. I carry my family. I carry my lineage, my ancestors, my spirit guides. I carry those that are not even born yet. That is my life. The irony of it is that I've been tired. I was tired. I didn't feel stuff, but I started feeling things. And when I started feeling things, I still found out that I was still reliable. I was still responsible, not reliable, still responsible for other people, other spirits. And now I help people on a regular basis that are going through their spiritual journey. I'm not responsible for them, but the responsibility I carry is for me to give a light. So this journey will take you back to feeling things that you've never felt before. You will cry more than you've ever cried in your whole entire existence. I have probably cried maybe about 10,000 tears by now. 10,000 liters of tears. Sometimes you don't even cry because you're sad. Oh no. You cry because you're sad. Oh Lord, you cry because you are happy. You don't cry because you're sad, no. Because I haven't cried in a while. And when the tears come out, they're not because it's in reverse now. It's not because I'm sad, it's because I'm happy. I cry more when I'm happy than when I'm sad because I'm hardly sad. That's the positivity of it, is that I'm hardly sad. I'm hardly angry. I'm hardly resentful, or I don't feel any other emotion at the moment. But most of the time, happiness, and most times, I'm neutral in terms of my emotions. Because why? I don't carry other people's feelings anymore. I don't have to mediate anymore. I don't have to tiptoe around people's emotions anymore. I don't have to control the room. I don't have to have control over everything, because that's exactly who I was before I became spiritual or the person that I am today. I always had to figure it out, and that's a full-time job. Sorry. And it means, for in simple terms, that's emotional labor. You do things and you carry people's problems even when you don't even know them, even strangers. So this journey is about feeling. If you are not ready to feel, then this is not for you, because you will feel things, all sorts of emotions, all of them: anger, resentment, sadness, happiness. It'll be a fluctuation of emotions. One day you wake up, you're fine. One day you wake up, you're sad. One day you wake up, you are fine again. One day you wake up again, and it's back to square one. That is what healing is. Excuse me, throat chakra. Excuse me. That is what healing looks like. And unfortunately, if you are not ready for those emotions, it becomes a difficult journey. Surrender. When they say surrender, I know there's been a lot of teachings about surrendering. Surrendering is letting go of control, and that comes with crying, because you have to go through the emotions of letting go. And that loss of control can be confusing. And when it becomes confusing, you start crying because you don't know what to do. Loss of control is painful. And one other thing that made me realize that I was actually not the same person anymore is one indication, or one pointed out that I've always been a strong person. When I had alcohol, I never got drunk. I was always restrained. I would drink more than anyone in the room, but I'll never get drunk. In my phase of drinking, heavily, I think the last 3 years before I became spiritual, the 3 years before my spiritual journey, from 2021 until say about 2023, I used to party and drink. And when I did, I hardly got drunk. But immediately I surrendered to this process. Immediately I became spiritual. One drink, blackout. I can't remember what happened. I embarrassed myself a couple of times. I just didn't like the feeling anymore. So I stopped drinking. I actually never really liked alcohol, if I'm being honest. The one thing that I hated was the papalas because I drank more than anyone else. So the following day, the hangover will sting. So the minute I became spiritual, that's restraint that contained that control thing disappeared. I became vulnerable. I became softer. And the masculinity in me kind of softened. The femininity in me became a little bit stronger. I balanced the polarity within myself. It's a process. It took many months and years to figure it all out. Lots of tough decisions, lots of losses, lots of sleepless nights. I had to lose weight. I had to lose myself to find myself. I had to let go of myself to find myself. I had to feel more to understand who I am. For me to understand my gifts, for me to understand my purpose, I had to feel more. Feeling is not a weakness. I had to learn that because unfortunately we learn that feelings, vulnerability, softness is weakness. In actual fact, it's a strength. Because the same feelings that I've always felt, I use every day. I feel people's emotions, people's energies. I can help people based on feeling. I help people on a regular basis because of feeling. I feel things. I'm super sensitive, and why I protect my space. But the same weakness, the same thing I thought was a weakness, is now a strength. I love you all. I'll see you on the next one. Love and light.